Before we start the show, I want to thank and recognize our sponsor, Krissy McCulloch, and her Mobile, Alabama firm, Empowered Family Law, empowering families to navigate difficult changes and create new beginnings.
One of the most powerful things you can know is that you may not have the ability to control the emotions that you're having, but you have the ability to choose how to deal with them. Everything you do is a choice, and you are not your emotions. They will come and go, but your core and your strength is there to stay.
Hey everyone, this is Rod Cade, and welcome to this week's episode of Rocket Motivation. This week's guest is the sponsor of this season of Rocket Motivation, but we did not ask her to come on as a guest just because she's paying our bills. She's going to talk not only about her devastating divorce on a personal level, but also will provide guidance on divorce because she is a divorce and family lawyer. Divorce is a tough thing for everybody who goes through it. This topic fits perfectly with overcoming adversity. Krissy McCulloch, welcome to Rocket Motivation.
Thank you so much for having me.
Krissy, let's do this. Tell us where you are now in your life. Let's talk about your practice, your family, where we are. You kind of just bring us up to speed.
So I'm a single mom. I have a 6-year-old and an 8-year-old, a son and a daughter, and we have made Mobile our chosen home. We've been living here since 2007. I started Empowered Family Law in 2021, January of last year. But I've been a family lawyer since I started practicing in 2008. I live here. My family lives in Asheville, North Carolina. So I maintain a very strong network of support with friends. And my children are fortunate to go to St. Paul's. We live in the historic district of Mobile, and we spend as much time with the people here that we can.
All right. Okay, let's go back. All right, let's talk about, your marriage. Kind of walk us through what happened, the divorce. Just take us through it.
So it took me a long time to be able to talk about this, but I met my ex-husband when I was 18 years old in college. So I was a child, and I was a child of an alcoholic, and should have seen a lot of red flags then, but stayed with that person until we were married for about 11 years. I gave birth to my daughter, Fiona, in 2013, and things were somewhat problematic. And what I didn't realize was the development of a codependent relationship that was occurring with my ex-husband's drinking. And when my son was born in 2016, that acted as sort of a trigger for his addiction. And things went downhill very quickly. And as I said, I don't have family here. I had a newborn child and a 2-year-old at the time, and a husband who was a severe alcoholic. I had a lot of nights where I was up all night sort of trying to manage his behavior and feed my baby and hope my daughter didn't wake up upstairs, and try to have a law practice. I have memories of going to trial on 2 hours of sleep and being paralyzed and terrified that people would find out.
Right. So you're going through this. So eventually you make the decision, okay, we've got to get a divorce. How does it finally click that you got to do this? And then how do you put it into practice?
For me, the last straw was seeing the effect that his behavior had on my children. The decision was made a Halloween night when my children were waiting on their dad dressed up in costumes to come take them trick-or-treating with us. And he didn't show up until 2 hours later, and he showed up drunk. And my children were devastated. They wanted their daddy, and they were so confused. And I just said no more at that particular point. I had already gotten to the point where I was fearful of certain things he would do. He was not living with us, but I was hopeful he could get treatment successfully, and that just wasn't in the cards, at least not then. So part of my paralysis was being a divorce attorney and being very concerned that this would somehow affect my practice adversely, which I now recognize was an irrational fear that was planted by an addict spouse and is very common. But once I did decide and I did reach out for support, I got so much support from my internal community, especially, that I just never looked back.
Right. But now when you get a divorce with your ex-husband, with him, though, it's not like other divorces where he's still in the picture and he sees the kids every other weekend, and he's gone.
He's gone. He has not seen my children in over 3 years. That is atypical, even for people who have addiction issues, and it's really unfortunate. I try to work out situations for families that don't result in this type of complete, amputation of a relationship. But in my case, and in some cases, it was the only safe option.
Right. But you get a divorce, your husband's out of the picture. Now it's just you and your 2 small kids. You've got a career. You're a lawyer. You do divorce work. You don't have any family here. How do you do it? How do you get it all done?
Well, Rod, I have a really wonderful nanny and wonderful supportive staff. But I'll tell you, my kids and I moved out on our own completely. My son was 3 and my daughter was 5. And I had a lot of really tough days. I had days where I really wasn't sure how I was going to make it all work. And I went to therapy regularly. I made sure that I exercised regularly. And I think the lesson of reaching out to your support system, even when you feel embarrassed, was one I had to learn over and over again. So nowadays, I have everything down to a system. My kids are a little bit older, as I said, but I've grown my practice so that I have a whole lot more support staff. I have a full-time sitter, and I have arranged our lives to where things are all very close together. And I live and die by my calendar. Right.
Well, but I know it's easier now, but when the divorce first went through, of course, it was probably even before then, since, given the situation you were in. I mean, how did that affect you as a person?
Oh, it completely transformed me. I would have described myself very much as a people pleaser all throughout my marriage, even though I think I was a fairly good lawyer, and I liked family law and I wanted to do family law. But as I came through this journey of dealing with the particulars of somebody who is in the throes of addiction, what I found was this light kind of turned on in me. And I developed a true passion and calling for family law. I think that a lot of people in this profession have a lot of empathy and are very capable lawyers. But until you understand why it's so hard for people who are in abusive relationships to leave, why it takes an average of 7 to 8 times for them to leave for good. If you haven't been through that yourself, it's really hard to understand why somebody would put up with that or believe lies that your life will be destroyed if you leave somebody who's actively destroying it. And it absolutely transformed my approach to my representation of my clients.
Well, and how do you use what you went through? Like when you're representing a client and based on everything you went through, so client comes in, how do you use what you've been through in your representation of the client?
So I'm very open about sharing my story with my clients, and I feel like it enables them to be much more honest with me. But I view my role as not just providing legal representation to my clients. If they come to me and I then continue to make every decision for somebody who has never been empowered to make decisions for themselves, then I'm no good to them, because at the end of the day, our relationship will end and they still won't have the capacity to really figure out what their powers and abilities are in life. And my goal is to help get people out of very difficult situations and truly feel empowered themselves. I mean, it sounds trite or whatever you want to say with the name of my firm, but I chose that word very carefully. So I try to connect people with as many resources as possible, both at the beginning of the divorce and then thereafter. I maintain a very good network of mental health professionals that I refer to all the time. Many people need financial counseling. They've never had a CPA. Some people have never even paid a bill. And I try to encourage people to find physical activity that is sustainable to them. I'm huge on the self-care of my clients so that they can then take care of their children.
So it sounds like to me you've got kind of a holistic approach I know there's some divorce lawyers out there that what they want to do is just fight and claw and get the best financial deal for their client and the best child support or best child custody. Of course, I mean, I know you want to get that for your client too, but it's more than that.
It's so much more than that. That is my job. That is the most basic layer of my job. But the clients who come to me, my view of humanity and what a lot of these people who have been in really bad relationships for a long time have developed is they sort of have put a veil over their true selves, and they have the capacity to be so much more. And that is not going to be accomplished by me just trying to tear down their family or tear down their spouse, especially when people have children. They're going to have to deal with the other spouse for the rest of their lives. I mean, even after the children are grown, weddings, graduations, grandchildren, what kind of society does it create if families are just irrevocably torn apart rather than just figuring out what a new normal can be for them?
And I guess the difficulty that you face every day in that is that it's so emotionally charged. Talk about the emotional aspect of divorce.
So a lot of people don't realize that the grieving process for divorce is essentially the same as for death. You are grieving the death of what could be the most important relationship in your life. And on a stress scale, there have been studies done that it is second only to grieving the death of a close loved one. So I try to explain to people that your emotions will mirror that process. You will experience grief in the cycles of denial, sadness, anger, bargaining, acceptance, and it's not linear. You're going, some days you'll feel like, man, I've really got a hold of this now. And then the next day you just feel like garbage again. And that's normal. And if you can allow that of yourself, and allow that kind of acceptance of the flow of your emotions, you will get through it. I tell people all the time, it's gonna get worse before it gets better. And then it's going to be so much better.
Yeah. Krissy, what advice would you give somebody that I guess they come to you, they're having trouble in their marriage, but they hadn't decided to pull the trigger yet on divorce? But I guess, this may not be a fair question because everybody's different. So, but what general advice would you give to somebody that's thinking, all right, things are bad. I don't think they're going to get better. I think I'm going to go the divorce route. What do you say?
Here's where I have to check my own jadedness at times, because it's easy for me to say, okay, I can see where this is going, but everybody has to make their own decision, right? So I tell people, nobody in this world knows when the right time for you to move forward on this is besides you, and you listen to your gut. This is when I recommend therapy. And I tell them, look, I'll send you to a good marriage therapist. I can always get you a divorce. You can get divorced any day of the week. You may not always have the opportunity to save your marriage, and you may feel like that's something you really need to try everything to do before you go forward. But I would call it cautious optimism. I'm always telling people to get as much information as they can get their hands on, to be aware that everything they're doing may be recorded or watched, and they need to be aware of that. It's hard to accept that the person that you're supposed to trust for the rest of your life could do something like that to you, but it happens all the time. So looking out for yourself and your kids, even if you're trying and hoping that your relationship can possibly work, is still something you really need to be doing.
In your experience, what percentage of marriages actually stay together once say somebody comes to see you and they do go to counseling? What percentage actually makes it?
I'm going to say this. Sometimes marriage counseling is very effective. Usually if somebody is to the point where they are seeking a divorce lawyer, more often than not, the marriage will probably end in divorce. That is completely my opinion. I don't have anything to back that up. But I have lots of people who come to me and say, I wish I had just listened to you a year ago. And I don't want to get too philosophical here, Rod, but I think there are some unrealistic expectations about marriage. I think people get married very young. I think they don't take the time to know themselves before they get married, and they therefore can't know what they need from a partner. I think that people a lot of times sort of forget to have time and focus for their spouse's needs once children come along. And if people are tuned into that and healthy enough to see that from the beginning, then I think it can be addressed. But a lot of times, by the time I see people, the relationship is so fractured that both people are just kind of done. And that's okay.
Yeah. That's a great analysis of where marriage is. And that's probably why half of the marriages in the United States end in divorce.
Exactly. And let me also add, to think that you are going to always meet all of your spouse's needs all the time for, 40 plus years is also not realistic. I do think there's something to the thought of a long-term marriage is going to go through rocky times, and maybe divorce shouldn't be the first call. And I fully believe in that. But people change over time. I mean, we're constantly evolving. If I think about the person I was 10 years ago, I don't even recognize her now. And I think a lot of people feel that way. I think that's sort of a natural course of life. And I don't view divorce anymore as this just devastating end. It's a transition that is sad, that a lot of people need to go through to create a better life for themselves on the other side. And I think if the stigma and shame could be removed from it, it wouldn't have to be viewed as such such a tragedy.
Yeah. Well, and I think it doesn't happen because emotions run so high. But if both spouses were reasonable, then it would probably be, if people are reasonable, everything's a lot easier.
Yeah.
But you would think that, I guess you could quibble over money or whatever a little bit, but if both just kind of came to the conclusion, well, we probably ought to just end this, but it's usually like one person that's got their heart broken or that's really angry.
It usually is. Every once in a while, it's people just say, this wasn't a great idea. When there are kids involved, it's hard to be as calm and rational about it. But we do uncontested divorces all the time. And even when divorces start out as contested, they often settle because people realize, what are we doing here? And so that is always a possibility, a common possibility.
All right, I want to go back a little bit. You've been through some tough times, and I'm talking about, mainly about your, when you went through your marriage as it was falling apart and your divorce. Tell me, all right, how did you get through it? And I don't mean I know your support system, but how internally, how mentally, how emotionally did you get through it?
I don't know how well I would have gotten through it if I did not have my kids and my practice to make me believe that I had no choice. In some ways, just sheer terror got me through it. I had to provide for my children. I'm their sole breadwinner. If I don't function, they don't have a parent. So I do think our bodies and our brains have the ability to put us into survival mode when we need it the most. Because there were days where I ran completely on adrenaline. That's not sustainable, but when you're in a period of crisis, your body does that for a reason. And so I got through it by keeping a laser focus on what I had to do to keep going for my kids. And that's what got me through.
And so with going through all that, what have you learned about yourself?
I have learned that I am capable of doing anything that I want to do. I'm capable of getting through things that I felt like were going to kill me at the time. And I think that I have a gift and an ability to help people also believe that about themselves. I'm able to face and see my flaws and the areas that I struggle with and need work. But I have an unshakable belief now that we are all here to share our gifts in our special way to help people. And that was never clear to me before, and now it's clear as day.
Right. You went through some tough times. Just people that are kind of down on their luck, going through adversity. In general, what advice would you give to them to try to help them get through it?
One of the most powerful things you can know is that you may not have the ability to control the emotions that you're having, but you have the ability to choose how to deal with them. Everything you do is a choice, and you are not your emotions. They will come and go, but your core and your strength is there to stay. And so when you're feeling just absolutely like you can't go on and you can't take another step, breathe and know that the next moment will come. And then the next and the next. I mean, sometimes it truly is moment to moment, not even day to day. And that's okay, because they will pass.
Krissy, if somebody wants to get in touch with you, I know you practice in the Mobile County area. If somebody, needs advice, any family law issue, how do they get in touch with you?
Well, they can go to my website, which is empoweredfamilylaw.com. They can call my office and set up an appointment with me, which is 251-277-2885. And then, we're on social media, Facebook and Instagram, Empowered Family Law. We're available. We're here.
And what's your mission statement?
So we empower families to navigate difficult changes and create new beginnings.
All right. Well, Krissy, it has been a pleasure having you on, but it's not over yet because I always give the guest the parting shot. This is where, I ask you to dig deep, give me some final wisdom, final advice, something that the listeners, something good to take us home. So now's the time.
I would just say there is always help available, and all you ever have to do is reach out and ask. The whole tough times make tough people, that's a really true statement. And so if you are going through a rocky time in your marriage, if you think you need help for a divorce, if you feel like there's no end in sight, just remember that we are there. There's a community of us who are there for you for this purpose. And there's no shame and there's no guilt. There's hope.
All right. Well, Krissy, it's been my honor having you on. And of course, I want to thank you so much for sponsoring this season of Rocket Motivation. I've talked to you before about this. I don't want just anybody sponsoring this podcast. I want somebody that is just awesome in what they do to sponsor this. And so you fit the bill perfectly. And so I want to thank so much for doing that and for coming on today.
Well, thank you, Rod. It's an honor to be connected with you and this podcast.
Great episode with Krissy McCulloch. It took us over 50 episodes, but we finally got a guest to talk about divorce, which is a life-changing and tough experience for those that go through it. It was great to get advice from Krissy, someone who has personal experience in going through a divorce and also professional experience. We'll have another great guest on Rocket Motivation next week. See you then. Thanks again for listening to Rocket Motivation. I want to again thank our sponsor, Krissy McCulloch, and her firm, Empowered Family Law. Listeners in the Mobile County, Alabama area, get in touch with Krissy and Empowered Family Law for all your family law issues and needs. If you would like to get my book, Get Back Up, it's available at Amazon. Just put in Get Back Up and my name, Rod Cade, and the book will pop up. I'd appreciate it if you would subscribe to Rocket Motivation wherever you listen to your podcasts. And please rate and review the shows and spread the word about Rocket Motivation to your friends. So until next time, remember, never give up and always get back up.